by the sword, die by the sword. Who did we roster or try to roster this season that let us down? And will we be back for more with the same players in 2023? It's time for Dingers.
This is Dingers, way more than fantasy baseball. We keep it real when we talk and knock it straight out the park. Let's see the stats, what's the average draft position? What kind of plays you making? Check the wins above replacement, check the lineups and the points. This I gotta see, what's your path to victory? Are they aiming for a dynasty? Get points going head to head, please don't do me no favors. We're always watching waivers, ain't no minor league, this is major, yeah. Dingers, let's go.
Welcome to Dingers, the only fantasy baseball podcast for smart people. It's not just Keston Hero that wins you championships. That's why week in and week out, we're delivering tips and strategies to help you live that straight up OG lifestyle. Tyler Childs, joined as always by Robert Baseball III from the Murder Room. How are you doing, Robbie?
You open the episode with a deep cut on Hero. This is going to be a rough one. Ty, I'm okay. I'm worse now than I was after the opening, but I'm okay and I'm ready to go.
And I wish I had the first cut as the deepest song ready to go after that, because to just sound like. So if you're listening, just sing it to yourself. And if you're walking down the street, please sing it yourself or save yourself the pain of listening to Rob.
By popular request, I did stop doing singing intros.
So this is a great episode, Robbie. We talked last week about dying on the hill and guys that we kind of did an if or prep heading into last season here. This episode's a little bit more of the risks we took and the failures we had, talking about some of those guys at each position that we might do differently, or maybe we're doubling down on, right? So we're going to talk about each of those experiences. For us, there are a minimal amount of crossover between our lists, but I think at the end of the day, this is really good stuff, and it's something that everybody should do. What did I do wrong last season? How can I improve on it? Was I a season too early in my strategy? Was I a season too early on a player? Like, all of these things are part of successful fantasy rosters. So make sure you're doing that. But we're going to give you a head start here by walking through ours. Before we do, Robbie, Twitter accounts, RobbieBaseball1 on Twitter, @AttorneyBoss on Twitter, @DingersPod on the Twitter machine. That's how you get us. And don't be shy. Ask us questions and stop asking people that give you generic answers. We will not lie to you, even if it hurts your feelings. And sometimes we enjoy that. It's okay. We're all here to get better. So, Robbie, how you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm okay, but just okay. And when we get through the list, you'll know why I'm only okay. Because, much like baseball, I missed 7 out of 10 here. So, and unfortunately, a lot of these guys are on multiple rosters in money leagues of mine, big money leagues of mine. And some of the guys that I didn't end up rostering, but did try to, you'll know why I didn't roster them, because before the season started, everything lined up for them to be successful, and maybe we'll dive into why they did not succeed. But I don't know. Otherwise, whatever. Nobody cares how I really am. Ty, what about you? All good. You got some orange on. You need the brightness.
It's sweater season, right? You mentioned it last week, talking about snow coming in, window beers, sweaters. Like, these are things. I'm actually heading to Kentucky this week, and one of my guys down there was just basically like, it might be too cold for my suit. I'm like, too cold for your suit, like, and he's like, listen, we don't all live where you live, and we don't all enjoy the temperatures that you guys have. And I'm like, listen, we don't necessarily enjoy them, but we're not afraid of a little cold. So it's supposed to be like 24 degrees on Saturday when we're going to be wearing said suits. So, wow, it's not something that, like, I'm going to be sweating. I'm going to be taking clothes off, and he's going to be putting a sweater on top of his suit. So that is what it is. But other than that, get to do a little travel. I will be in Kentucky, which means a new bottle of bourbon. Looking forward to that. And that will be featured in a future episode here on Dingers. But on that note, Robbie, let's talk about the current bottle. A long time ago,
someone decided to put stuff in glass bottles. In some of these bottles, they put juice or milk, and that was stupid. Today, only alcohol and a few other products remain in the containers from the gods. It's time for beers and bourbon, because good advice only comes in a bottle.
No, I watched you do it this time. After the last podcast, when I was like, that didn't sound right. Okay. But I can't even do that because I already opened mine. But I'm having the same thing I was last pod, which is Coors Original, because I'm a helpful person. I got a free case of Coors from it, and you're having
Coors Original. That's Coors Banquet.
But it just says original on it. It doesn't say like banquet. Like
it says banquet right there in the red.
No, it says original in the red. It says Coors, and then it says original.
No,
I always dent my can at the top because if you see this, I dent the can at the top so that it pours cleanly. Would have been great if I just poured that on my keyboard right now. But anyway, I will go look upstairs. I know it's supposed to be banquet, but this one says original. Maybe no, it's a milliliter. So I was gonna say maybe
no, just get a Sharpie, draw over original, put banquet on there,
and then it's the Coors that cost more. Just like some of the players on this list cost more than they should have, because they didn't all pan out this year. But we set it up for everybody with a lineup because that's the easiest way to break it down for fantasy purposes. You know, catcher, first base, second base, and so on. A couple pitchers, a couple RPs, because I have yet to see a fantasy league winner who didn't have big hits in all of these categories, right? You need those RPs that no one's thinking of. You need the starting pitchers that come and overachieve or just do amazing things for you. This is the opposite, the anti-list of that. These are the guys that we wanted those things to come from and did not get them. And we'll discuss. So I don't know, Ty, do we want to go position here? We've organized it like that.
Yeah, let's start there. And I mean, catcher's really easy. We always start with catcher, so we don't want to break trend or tradition here. It's easy because we both got burnt by the same guy in a lot of ways. And then I just did my salute to my guy as well in my list. But Keibert Ruiz is a guy that I think we both still very much believe in. I will say this, exiting the season, I do have a concern for power upside. Like I always saw him as like a 20 home run guy, hit for decent average, kind of a guy that could hit in the 6 or the 7 spot and have reasonable production, right? I didn't see that this year. And listen, catchers almost always take a little bit longer to kind of figure it out. Like that's always a trend. I just thought we'd see a little bit more good contact, like we've seen from, an Alejandro Kirk, who has a bit of a similar profile statistically, right? Maybe less so on like the late contact, right? Like Kirk, had the best 2-strike average in all of baseball, right? That's obviously his advantage, but I saw Keibert being a little bit of a better hitter than we saw this year, and I think there's room for improvement. I'm certainly not in the camp where it's like, listen, I'm done with Keibert Ruiz,
right? Yeah, not a lost cause.
But certainly I thought there would have been some progress this year, and there was very little, if any.
Yeah, to sum it up, 394 at bats for Ruiz, 7 dingers, 6 stolen bases. We'll take the 6 stolen bases, but just for reference, Kyle Schwarber had 10. So 254 average, which
he hit a 488-foot home run tonight. Just fun fact.
Schwarbomb. Yeah,
that's a Schwarbomb.
Also, no, I'm not getting off on. We'll talk about Schwarber in another episode. 313 OBP for Ruiz, 33 runs, 36 RBIs, and he was outside the top 10 across the board in all of your leagues. So generic, because every league's different, but generic points, 5x5, 8x8. He was not a top 10 catcher. That's why he's on the list, because we both expected him to be closer to the 10 than to the 5, I think, but we expected him to be on this list, on a list of top 10 guys, and he was not. And then you have Molina, who I think this was, swan songy, right? This is
but even for Molina, decline. Like as a guy that
down.
Just consistently grinds out consistent seasons, this was an awful season, right? So yeah, I mean that for me, like I love Molina. He's won me a lot of games, but yeah, this was it. And I just more or less I appreciate you, salute, even though you were shit this year, kind of thing.
Yeah, 262 at bats, which is already terrible for him. 5 dingers, 19
Yeah.
runs, 24 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, 214 average. Ugh, not what we're used to from yada 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 yada. So I'll see you later. But let's go on to what to me was a bit less of a fail and a bit more of no, not a progression. It wasn't a progression. It was a bit of a reset, and that's my first base pick, Ryan Mountcastle, who I was trying to get everywhere because he had 33 dingers and a 255 average, a 796 OPS, which to me was just enough for people to think, oh, he's a power bat, but I don't really need him. Like he's not elite. And I was thinking, well, if he, tunes it up a little bit, he could be a 260 plus average guy, well into the 850s for the OPS, but it went the other way. He dipped a bit, not a lot. Average was 250, so very minor change there, but he was down 70 points in the OPS to 728. He finished the year with 22 dingers, and he had more at bats, but less runs, less RBIs, same stolen bases, which is 4, which is very minimal, and just not what I wanted from Mountcastle. And I know Baltimore had a stretch where they were really good, but they still did what we expected, which was not compete. They had September baseball that mattered, I guess, if you count like the first weekend in September against Toronto. But it faded quickly for them, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, they're at least 2 years early, right, in that run.
Yeah, I mean, it was the pitching at the start of the year that was going to cost them, and it was the pitching that they didn't have. But things shuffled in different ways in Baltimore this year. But anyway, Mountcastle, I was just hoping for more. I did not get it. So Mountcastle, to me, is somebody I will be looking at intensely this offseason. I'm also going to do the advanced stat dive. For anyone who doesn't know, we do our best not to get too much into the weeds on the advanced stats because, I mean, you can look it up just as easily as we can. But we like to keep things simple on the podcast and talk about why we like the players. We also talk more about swings, things of that nature than we do rhyming off all the numbers, but we give you the basic stats. So you got them.
And the one thing that would be really interesting with Mountcastle for me is like, how much did that outfield wall impact that home run total? Right. Right-handed stick. Like, he didn't play enough games in Toronto where he would have hit 80 home runs. He owned the Blue Jays. But yeah, I mean, there's an interesting conversation to be had there because of all the players on that Baltimore roster, like he is the guy that is the most impacted by that change, right? So I think it's an interesting move that they made. I don't know if they're going to keep it permanently or not, but yeah, I think it's an interesting decision that they made with him, and I think it's definitely going to hurt Mountcastle, and maybe they're going to try and leverage it for a long-term contract, which would be the most expensive leverage play of all time. But I would appreciate the savvy on that front. So,
well, I mean, the Braves are doing it with breakout rookies, Michael Harris and then Spencer Strider. So if Baltimore goes the other way with struggling sophomores, I mean, why not? Just extend everybody. Extend everybody.
But to go through the effort of moving your outfield wall to get it done,
simply to save, save. Like, I mean, really, how much did it cost to move the wall, and then how many millions of dollars do they save? But will MLB let them move it back? So
I don't know. The cost of construction these days, but yeah, I mean, I had the Candyman Heimer Candelario. I think a little bit of a congested situation in Detroit. He started the season injured. Always talked about Candelario being a second half guy. I've made that clear over a couple of years here, but at the end of the day, just wasn't enough, right? 13 home runs was okay, right? Given a small decrease in at bats this year. It's not the worst thing in the world, but the OPS 633 down from the career mark of 723 and the 795 and 872 in the previous 2 seasons, right? So definite production drop. I still like Candelario moving forward. I will say that I'm looking for him in undervalued situations as opposed to where I was kind of going into this year where I was thinking he could be a step forward guy. I'm now looking for him to fall back in drafts and might pick him up that way. I still like him though. And frankly, with Scope getting older, taking less at bats, Robbie Grossman not going to be there, right? There's probably a couple more bats. Obviously, Torkelson's going to be in that lineup next year again. Miggy might retire, right? So there should be more at bats there for Candelario, and that should get him to back to that 600 mark, which we saw in 2021. And at that point, the thing I'm looking for, I have to see 25 home runs from Candelario next year. Like that's the floor that I have to see for me to be excited about him. If not, you need a different corner infield. Fact.
Yeah, I feel like in previous podcasts when diving into Jamar, you talked about the fact that his April Mays were so poor. So for what you're saying for 25 dingers, he's going to need to have a good April, a good May, and that's just I don't know if that's in the cards, but we'll have to see how it works for him. My other
last thing, sorry, Robbie, last thing really quick. Really like the OBP drop this year, 272.
Oh wow! I didn't know it was that low.
Significantly below what is now a career 322, but like 351, 369, 317, 406 are the 4 seasons around that dip, right? So steps forward, like there really shouldn't be that regression. There's this, to me, screams bounce back, right? Like it's right there and it's smacking in the face.
Really?
So like I think
I was
he's
thinking
gonna
optometrist. I think he needs an optometrist.
I think he was. To me, that tells me there's an underlying injury, which he did have. Right? It suggests that something wasn't working, so he was trying a different approach to make up for that. And the limited at bats or missing the first part of the season probably played a role in that. And I'll pull the splits really quick just to put it to bed, just to see what the kind of back half of the year looked like. What do we got here? Yeah, I hit 321 in the last month. Wait, that's not right. How is that even possible? Hey, hold the phone. No, he did. He hit 321. He hit 321 in the last 30 days. So I will stay on my point that I think.
How horrible was that rest of season? That's that
must have been pretty bad. Yeah. 803 OPS, 339 OBP in that last month. So
he was Joey Votto until September.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I like him moving forward. Switch hitter again. Lots there.
You're right back in now.
I'm shoulder deep in the pond now. Here we go. Let's go.
I think what you need to do is just put a note on your phone, like in your calendar, for like August 28th next year, and then in any leagues that you're looking to make a playoff run, you immediately go pick him up off waivers because no one else is going to have him at the rate that he played this year until September. So the other guy that I had, Ty, was first base, second base, kind of bubble candidate, or whatever you want to say, is Keston Hiura, who you did mention off the hop, which did piss me right off. The good thing that Hiura did this year in only 234 at bats was he had 14 dingers. He had 5 stolen bases. Those are good counting stats that we like to see. He also struck out just a hair under 50% of the time. Now that's something that typically I would like to say red flag. I don't know how they can do this, but they did continue to send him out there. And I don't know what his permanent role is going to be with Milwaukee. Well, yeah, Milwaukee moving forward, but it could be a splits DH type guy. 765 OPS is fine. It is fine in today's MLB. 226 average was not great. Yeah,
I just don't think you can roll him out at first base, which was where he got most of those at bats this year.
Yeah,
because they were giving Rowdy some days off, but like Rowdy is a significantly better first baseman. So I don't think you roll Hiura out anywhere but like maybe he gets some more reps at third. Right.
Well, he did get some second base time through injury this year. Like like not his own, through starter injury that he moved over to it. But production wise, he was okay this year. If he, let's not do the multiplier, because if he had had X number of plate appearances, lines would have looked better, right? He would have been in the 70s for runs and RBIs, but we don't know that. We don't know what a hot stretch and a cold stretch would have done because Hiura was never able to get consistent at bats. So this is somebody who moved from. No,
sorry, go ahead. Well, but you have Luis Urias and Colton Wong on the infield, right? And then you have what's the prospect, Harang or whatever his name is, Bryce.
Yeah, they had Willie Adames as well.
Yeah, but he'll be back.
Oh, you're talking about guys that are gone?
No, guys that are coming up. What's the prospect? So Adames is there till 25. The shortstop prospect. There's Chirios, but then there's a guy that's ahead of him that plays a little bit better defense than might see.
You're outfielder,
Bryce,
Hedberg.
No, No, infield. Bryce. Hooray. No. What the heck's his
I
name?
don't know. I'm blanking on who you're
I'll look it
talking
up. You go on and talk. I'll
Sure.
find it.
Sure. Well, anyway, with Hira, I think it's more a case of no matter your league size. I mean, obviously, if you're in 15 team and under, you're not really wanting to do anything but give him your final roster spot. But if you're 15 team and larger, you're going to be looking for him to be one of your final bench guys or just a bench bat.
Bryce
He's not a
Bryce Turang.
Bryce Trang. Okay, sure. But I don't think that Hira's involvement in KC's future plans are that of a
Milwaukee.
starter at the moment. Milwaukee. Yeah, sorry.
No,
Milwaukee,
I think you have
starter.
to. I think you have to trade him. Like I think you. It's not a should. I think you have to. You've got Urias for a while. You've got Rowdy for a couple more years. You've got Adames and Colton Wong you signed, right? So like you've got Churio, you've got Turan coming, right? You've got Esteury Ruiz, right? Like you just don't need Castanera. Like,
Well,
he's got to go.
I mean, Toronto had the same thing with Rowdy, where there were some in the camp that said this is your guy, and he showed promise, but they just didn't see it happening, and they moved him quick. And I feel like maybe with Hira, they just waited too long to make that move. Now, I don't know what he's going to be offered as far as if he's arbitration eligible or anything like that.
But the
those
power's
could be
there.
the moves. But
He
yeah,
needs to go
definitely. He
somewhere-
showed us this year.
But he needs to go somewhere where they're going to be like, listen, kid, you suck. We need to drop this hitch in your swing and you'll be good. Are you up for it? Like that's what has to happen. And Milwaukee clearly isn't interested in doing it. Time to move on. You have lots of depth. You don't need them. Make the move.
Well, this is the guy that I was going to compare him to. I was going to say if anybody wants to like take a deep breath and think to themselves about the good and bad of a Joey Gallo type. Do you want to ask Hira to sell out for power? Well, hold on.
No.
Do you want to ask him to sell it for power? No, you don't. Why? Because he can also play a little bit better. Now, what's the other dude that hits for a ton of power that can do good things and bad for fantasy purposes? That's Kyle Schwarber. Do you think he can be him? No, I don't, because Kyle Schwarber was a top 50 player in 8x8 this year. And that is not a Keston Hira. That would be like the peak ceiling for him. So I don't know where we're going to fall with him, but I'm not penciling him into dynasty starter status at this moment in time.
I think he's Houston Teoscar Hernandez. Like the upside is clearly there. Like I don't think anybody, even me, who is like in the furthest away from acquiring Hira anywhere.
So the Aletmius Diaz trade needs to take place.
Just get
utility infielder.
Yeah. Just go get a different take and see if you can unlock the upside. Like he clearly has enough upside. There's no like anyone that argues against that is just being silly.
Right.
Like how do you get him to a place where he's going to get a different hitting philosophy and somebody that's going to tell him that what he's doing is stupid, right? Like it just has to happen. Like go play in Colorado, right? Like there's lots of pit.
Yeah, 500 at bats, and he'll have 30 dingers. That's what's going to happen. It's what's the rest of it going to be? Because you're not going to allow a 50% strikeout rate for 500 at bats. That's not a starter in MLB. No. He's going to ruin too many of your potential, inning runs, or sorry, run scoring innings. But maybe he's a better topic for us this offseason than I thought, Ty. I thought it would be a quick little transition.
I'm going to end that with Keston Hira for David Bednar. Done. Moving on. My second baseman was significantly worse than yours. And that's Garrett Hampson. Is a guy on a contract here. I was playing the contract bet, and I thought he would be not awful. And he happened to fall into the awful category. And I like the position flex. I only had him in a couple of the deep leagues where the position flex mattered. And I'm not particularly deep in those leagues on the offensive side. So it was a smart move for me to own him. It helped me make sure I actually had people to play baseball. But he played baseball very poorly. So nobody's really shocked by that as a pick here and moving on. Third base gets a little more interesting. Robbie, I'm surprised by yours. So I'll go to mine and then I'll transition yours. I have JD there, Josh Donaldson. I was excited by the move to New York because one thing I've always liked about JD's swing, in his prime years, he was a pull hitter. Like he just mashed the ball on the pull side. But he always had the ball. He always had the ability to flip the ball to right field, and he hit a lot of home runs in Toronto to right field. Didn't do that obviously a ton in Minnesota. A little more pull side power while he was there. Same with Atlanta. But what I've seen this year in the games that I have watched for Donaldson, there's just a ton of hard hit baseballs that he's just laid on. So he's trying to go to right field, but he's hitting it into the third or second deck in like, I don't know what the right way to say this is, like 60 feet right of the foul pole or 40 feet right of the foul pole. And he's just a little late on those pitches. He's making great contact. So I don't know if he can somehow automatically recover from that moving into next year, but I'm trying to move away from Donaldson everywhere. And I think that's kind of the trend we should all look at, but definitely disappointed with what we got this year.
Well, disappointed for me would also sum up the second baseman that I did pick, which was Cesar Hernandez, because I wanted him everywhere. This is more redraft. Like Nick Madrigal, yes, absolutely for Dynasty. He was a guy I circled. Injury prevented it, and then less than ideal performance on the average for Madrigal, and Dynasty stock down. Cesar Hernandez, on the other hand, was someone who I thought could this year for a championship team help to really, close things off for you. And by season's end, the line was down in runs. He had 20 less runs than the year before, 64 this year. RBIs almost in half, 34 the year before, 62. But the biggest one was home runs. He had 21 home runs in 2021. He had 1 this year. He had 10 stolen bases to 1, but it doesn't matter that he had 9 extra stolen bases because the power was down so much. The average was up 16 points to 248, which again does not help a great deal. And the OPS 629. So he was very disappointing to me, but this was a one and done situation for me. But again, in Dynasty, you pick these guys up because others are not. And that's where you can try to, lightning in a bottle for a season. The other guy that I had everywhere was very excited for, and end of season, I'm not saying he won me anything, but I'm happy to have him for 2023 and looking at good things. That's Ramon Urias with Baltimore Orioles. One of the things we've talked about a lot, we do it every year. It's just a thing I do. I look at the bottom dwelling teams. I see what they've got going on at their MLB level. I see who's just bubbling down below AA, AAA, who could come up. And sometimes you get a guy like Ramon Urias, who kind of doesn't mean anything to Dynasty owners, gets to AAA and has less than 10% rostered on Fantrax, on CBS, on any of those Dynasty type sites. And then I start to look for them to add them into my own league. Well, Urias only had 403 at bats this year. Injury was a thing, but he had 50 runs, 51 RBIs, 16 dingers. Not a good walk, not a good OBP guy, but 248 average was, league average-ish, and OPS 719. I think MLB's league average was 714. I'll have to check that as we go through the offseason. But I liked what he did. I didn't love it, and I think there's more in the tank for him next year, assuming, of course, he's locked and loaded third base, because he started this year as a potential shortstop, second base, maybe move to third, and now he looks like he is the third baseman. So depending on what Baltimore does this offseason, I like Urias. There are things that he can do better, of course, and more contact, more dingers would be one of those things. So,
yeah, he's definitely going to be an interesting one this offseason, because Baltimore definitely is primed to add payroll. I think they have to do it on the pitching side, right? I think, like, if you look at some of those veteran pitchers that are out there, like the DeGroms, like the Sales, like the Rodons, like those are the kind of guys that I see Baltimore spending some money on this year, because their offensive pipeline is stacked. Like I really like, we've talked about this at the beginning of this year, but I think for me, Ramon Urias is a potential casualty of all of that.
Definitely.
So,
and their love for Jorge Mateo, Ty, like the Baltimore Oriole love for Jorge Mateo to be like a shortstop for them is just confusing the crap out of me, because Urias is perfectly fine and capable at shortstop. But Mateo
but shortstop's but shortstop's over. Like there's no guy anymore.
Well, I'm just saying, like, for Baltimore, because what they've done is to what you just said, they've drafted the bats. They need to go and buy the pitching. That's how that's how they got to catch up.
But Gunner's the shortstop. So unless you see Gunner as third baseman, which
Well,
I
I
don't.
think that's well, okay. I was gonna say I think that's possible, but I also just think that like Mateo clogging up the middle. I mean, they were given so many at bats to Odor. It's very confusing what was happening in Baltimore when you try to break it down from a team that's competing, not competing. You know what I mean, right? Like Odor was not helping them win, yet he consistently was in the lineup. So I don't know who the hell he was talking to, what he was doing on the bench that kept him. You know, maybe he was just telling everybody the Batista story over and over, and like somehow everyone like clung to him. But Urias is
but
a
like
baseball player, and Odor and Mateo, I think, are not. Mateo is a bench bat, and not even a bat. He's a stolen base threat. But anyway,
yeah. But the pipeline is Henderson pre-mentioned. I do think Henderson can move to third, but I don't think it's until we see one of Jackson Holiday or Carlos
do
Correa.
not. Oh, okay. I was gonna say do not say Adam Hall because then I would need to.
No. Yeah, no. Halsey's not even in the top list, which is a guy that I still think could
He's
show up
falling
on this list. I mean, listen, like he elite? No. But he did make, I believe, the full move to center field last year. And you know, there's still reasonable statistics. Like he hit, listen to this, in
Here he goes, everybody.
I'm just gonna say his 2022 stat line,
Yep.
270 batting average,
This is
713
Adam Hall. Sorry, Ty. Just
Yeah.
just tell everybody who we're talking about here.
Yeah, so 713 OPS, Adam Hall, with 17 stolen bases in only 211 at bats. So staying healthy, like there's a profile here. Like and I'm telling you, like I have coached this kid, and he is one of the smartest baseball players that I've ever been around. The upside is there. It's whether he can stay healthy, I think, and he's got a couple years here now where he's been injured, so that's going to be what slows him down. But he played AAA ball briefly, really small cup of coffee, this last season. So I think he could get an aggressive assignment, and they might let him sink or swim entering this year, and they find out what they got.
I wonder if he's Rule 5 eligible. That'll be something that we get to cover come the month of December, just so everybody that's listening knows. We are Rule 5 aficionados.
Are we 2016 or 2017 on the Rule 5?
For high school, it should be 17, and then college, I think, is 18.
So yeah, he was 2017, so he would be Rule 5.
Okay.
And so I don't believe he's on the 40 man. That actually is a great call. He probably will get picked on that.
Yeah, we do have a Rule 5, or not a Rule 5, sorry. We do have an AFL, Arizona Fall League podcast that we've lined up. That'll be the next one we record. We'll be talking about how guys are doing, also just discussing the players that are there. Because sometimes it is a matter of if they play well, they will get added to the 40 man and then protected from the Rule 5. And some of the other guys end up becoming the Nelson Velasquez, Juan Yepes, who we then see the following season making MLB impacts some greater than others.
And hear me out. Great risk reward because, okay, Akil Baddoo style player, moderate power, speed, defense, injury history. So pull him over. Oh, no, he's out for the season. Boom. Keep him on your roster. Right? Very, very plausible. I'm just saying, like, that's a storyline that could very easily happen here.
Do you want to take him out of a year of pro ball? Anyway, I don't think he has enough AAA time, but I mean, we saw the Padres do, what was it, 5 picks one year they did that with. They've been busy. Teams do things. Who knows? Who knows what'll happen?
I just think there's enough here on the defense and contact side that if there's a guy that's a little bit further away that could be a potential steal, like this could fit theoretically, like a Colorado, right, with no outfield depth, could be a play there.
Okay, well, Zach Veen's in the AFL. That's another episode, and he's also a high schooler.
Yeah.
Ty, who was the shortstop you were all over this year? Wanted everywhere.
I mean, it's the same guy.
Trying to get him.
Yeah, it's Tatis. I mean, he was obviously a disappointment. Like, there's other shortstops I could have picked, but I'm just angry. He cost me my home league title. I was primed to make a deep run in the home league, and literally, and you can't make this up, one day after our trade deadline, he's PD'd to death. And it murdered me because I had to run Torres out, who was a great stopgap, served me well for what I had envisioned, and I was primed for playoffs. And he just shot me in the foot with that move. Unfortunate. Like, I would have run a really, really good team out there. Like, my entire offense was ranked in the top 100. So adding Tatis to that would have been really, really, really strong. So that hurt. And as a result, he's on this list.
And valid to have a guy because he hurt you. And I mean, you want to talk about big money redraft, big money dynasty, contract leagues, anywhere that is not a keep forever dynasty. The people who rostered Tatis are not happy today for the reasons you just said. And I mean, you're in particular the home league, like for us. It's a 14-team league. You can keep 7 guys plus 1 rookie, but it's not like actual rookie standards. It's what I call BS rookie standards. But it's gonna work out okay. It's gonna work out okay.
Get the tiny violin out.
It's going to work out okay because I'm going to be keeping Vaughn Grissom this year, who by MLB standards is no longer a rookie with his 141 at bats, but by our home league is under 150. So he'll be sticking with me.
But the rule makes sense because not everybody in that league is savvy, right? And that's the thing. It's there to protect the people that don't do the research that you and I do. And it's that simple.
Sure. All right, fine.
Set
I'm a
your league
0
up for the people that are in it. Just because you can't beat up on all the idiots in that league. That's
just gonna say, I'm a 0-time winner of that league. But anyway, so my shortstop's far less exciting. Well, at least one of them is far less exciting than yours. Kevin Smith was one of the guys who, former Blue Jay. I guess you want to call me homering out for that one. Sure. But I was excited at the idea of Kevin Smith moving to Oakland, thought maybe he would be third base shortstop. I didn't know what Oakland was going to do, but I thought there were at-bats there, and they thought otherwise. And he got a bit of a run, but just did nothing. Sub 200 average, no power, no stolen bases, and he was out. The other guy that I was very excited with, but honestly did not get to roster in many leagues, and I tried aggressively to get him in a few, was Jazz Chisholm. Jazz only had 213 at bats this year, but he did a lot of damage. 12 stolen bases, 14 home runs, 45 RBIs. Try to imagine 45 RBIs, 39 runs, and 213 at bats. That's a ton of production on a crappy team. Like, just do the basic thing that we just talked about before. Don't do this. Double the at bats, give him 426. Now he's almost like, 90 RBIs, 80 runs, 28 dingers. That's not a full season. That's nothing close to it. So you're talking about the potential for him to be really big, but you got a hot streak in there, you got a cold streak. A lot of that stuff can change. Anyway, 860 OPS for Jazz and a 254 average. I'm loving Jazz for this offseason. I'm loving him as a guy to try to acquire. However, I know there's going to be a heavy prospect price to pay. If I've got JJ Abrams anywhere, I would 1-for-1 with Jazz Chisholm in a heartbeat. I don't give a crap about the format. Just give me Jazz who can get it done, and I'm going to enjoy him as a ball player. I don't want to see Abrams on a really crummy Washington team who's going to be kicking the next few guys I'm going to be talking about out there next year, hoping for better returns. Things have changed in Washington. They need an offensive leader. I don't see who that's going to be. It's not going to be a committee that gets runs. They're not Tampa Bay. They're going to try to be, that's my fear. They're going to try to be Tampa Bay before they figured it out. But Jazz Chisholm and Kevin Smith both missed, but I think Chisholm's got the raw skills to be an elite second base shortstop guy in the future. Yeah.
Chisholm absolutely rakes on my MLB The Show team.
Thank goodness. We have not had enough. Have you been playing that much now with the 2 kids?
No, not at all.
No.
Yeah.
They really got in the way, huh?
That's a hard no. But yeah, it is what it is. So outfield, Washington is your stack. I do a really good job, as much as I homer out on the Jays like regularly. I do a really good job of not overdrafting Blue Jays. And it's mainly because other people do overdraft them in a lot of the leagues that I'm in, whether it's Canadians or people just super hyped about some of the really good guys. Like I don't draft that way. It's just not the way I do my drafts. But
every league you're in, Ty, if you're
Yep,
if you're in a league with strangers, if you're in a home league, whatever it is, as long as it's not like a home league and you live in, I don't know, Iowa, you will have a Canadian in your league. And if you are not seeing Blue Jays available when you're ready to either pick, whether it's like a redraft, a keeper, dynasty, whatever the format, doesn't matter. If a guy has 4 Blue Jays, high percent, 90% chance he's a Canadian. And he's like, I can't believe you guys didn't draft whoever it is. because we get in this vacuum with Rogers, which is the company that both owns the Blue Jays and owns one of the major sports stations, Sportsnet, and they just pump it into everyone's veins that all of these Blue Jays players are so damn good that everyone in Canada gets hyped up. Even guys that get traded away, prospects, anything, doesn't matter. That's all that we hear about is how good all of these Blue Jay players are. And then in the offseason, they open it up to only like the top, 10 to 15 type free agents that the Blue Jays should be signing, likely guys. And then they talk about like all the crappy Wiley vets who they could sign if all these big names don't fall through. Don't end up signing and things fall down to the second, third tier dudes. So in your leagues, if there's a bunch of Blue Jays that you happen to roster and you're not a big fan of the Blue Jays, or you see like things are going to go well, find the Canadian and then just rake them over the coals and trade them your Blue Jays. Just putting that out there.
You know what though? Like as long as I'm not being traded, somebody from the middle of the innings or SP4, SP5, like I'm listening, right? Like that's the Jays are a decent offensive team, and when it comes to fantasy, they might not win in real life, but they can very much help you in fantasy baseball. So I don't necessarily hate being traded those guys, Robbie.
Okay, well, transition to your outfield.
Yeah, well, I was about to. The guy that what my transition was going to be, and it was going to be. And if you have Cavan Biggio in any leagues that you participate in with me, feel free to trade him to me because I will gladly take him heading into next season. I think there's some extra bats. I do think Witt's going to be the main second baseman in Toronto next year. I would actually really like to see part of the Jays offseason be signing Witt and signing Chapman to like 4-year deals for both of them would be ideal. That gets Witt to the end of his career, Chapman, and that solidifies our infield. Like it's done. So what I like about that is it puts Cavan Biggio in left field and it makes Gurriel very dispensable, which I can't handle watching that guy play left field anymore. So I am pro Biggio for both the reasons that I think he's better offensively than what we've seen up until now, and because I hate watching Gurriel play baseball. So between those two things, I'm in on Biggio in a big way. I mean, the reality is here, he's a sneaky stolen base option, like not a ton, but he's going to get you double digits, pretty much guaranteed. He's going to walk a crap ton. And frankly, there's way more power in that bat than we've seen. So I really believe once the pull shift side gets lifted for him, I think it's going to unlock his power a little bit, because I think he spent a lot of the first couple of years in the pros trying to like place the ball instead of hitting the ball really hard. So I think that's going to be the big change for him. And we've talked about it a couple episodes back about the pull side hitters having a huge step forward entering 2023 with the rule changes. And for me, I was a little early on that for Biggio, but I still believe he's a guy. Like he might be my new Grichuk. You said that in the last episode. Grichuk's the guy that had to go. Might be my new guy that I'm going to hang on to. And again, same thing I said with Grichuk. Like, is he an elite guy? Absolutely not. Like, he's not Tyler O'Neill to me. He's not a guy that I'm telling you is a huge bust out guy. But he's a guy that can make you better and not cost you a lot. And that's what I like about Biggio.
Yeah, the cost of acquisition will not be high for Biggio, unless, of course, he's currently rostered by a Blue Jay fan. Anyone else that would be sane and or level-headed would say, I don't know where he's going to play. But as we all know, those are the guys that get 400-plus at-bats by kicking around. As long as Biggio can't get sent down, like if he's out of options, that's an asset for Biggio himself.
One thing that's really important on a Biggio acquisition is that there's lots of rumors and speculation that Ramil Tepe is going to get DFA'd or non-tendered. Sorry, not DFA'd.
Because of money.
Yeah. And at the same time, like the Jays have an outfield logjam. So you might see one of, I don't think they're going to trade Teoscar, but I think Gurriel's the guy. And I was saying this to my brother, like you don't trade Teoscar when he's Vladdy's best friend and you're trying to lock Vladdy up for the long term. You just don't do it, right? So for me, it just the path for Biggio to be 500 at bat guy is there, and if that happens, there's enough value there for me.
Okay, Well, I've got a duo of disappointments with the Nationals in Lane Thomas and Yadiel Hernandez. Hernandez was an older guy to come into this year. I just thought there would be at bats. I thought there'd be production, and he was okay, but he was not above average, which is what you need when you're picking a guy like a Yadiel Hernandez and having to pay prospect value for him to extend what was a brief period of success when he finally did get at bats post trade deadline in 2021. Lane Thomas, however, came over from St. Louis, and I had high expectations with him hitting at the top of the lineup, and then he ended up hitting like 6 a bunch, and he was hitting 9th, and then he was leading off, and I was getting annoyed. But at the end of the year, 490. Yep.
Did you know that he was originally a J?
No, I did not.
Traded for international money. Sorry.
Wow.
I just learned that I just learned that the other day. I thought I would share. Sorry.
Do you know how well, I'm just curious, do you know how late of a draft pick he was? Like to be traded for internet. That's high. Geez. 5th round and then traded for international money. I wonder if that had anything to do with signing someone that is of impact, or if it was, just like a crappy throwaway.
14 was that Vladdy year?
Yeah.
14 might have been Vladdy. I'll look that up while you continue.
Okay,
on.
Sure. So Thomas, 498 at bats, 62 runs, which you'll take. I mean, it's not great, but you'll take it. 52 RBIs, that's middle of the road. 17 dingers is fine. 8 stolen bases is okay. The sub 30 strikeout percentage, you'll take. The what was he? 8%, 7% walk rate, not great. 241 average, a little below league average. 705 OPS, a little below league average. That's ideal. That's not ideal. That's exactly what Lane Thomas did. Just enough that you are annoyed from him, but his final month was not great of the year. He did dip off at the end. And what I would love to see is everyone to just forget and not want to roster Lane Thomas, and I will scoop him up everywhere. I just assume he's going to be a starter next year, and he's going to have more than 500 at bats. And I want to see all those numbers. Worst case scenario, repeat, but more than likely give him a, 7-10% increase, and then we can start to see where he could actually go. The big thing I thought was going to be runs. I thought he was going to have a ton of runs because he was at the top of the lineup, but he didn't consistently lead off. If he does next year, that's where the money is. And Yadiel Hernandez is just like a power average bat that will probably be back with Washington next year. I'm going to very quickly try to see where he finished because I know he was hurt. So he didn't even play at all in September, but 305 at bats last year, 9 dingers, 30 runs, 41 RBIs. That's a lot of production for 300 at bats. 269 average, 722 OPS. And, I would look at a flyer for him, but again, it's short term for Thomas. So those are the two guys, for Thomas and Hernandez. Disappointed by both for different reasons, but also interested in Thomas, not interested in Hernandez. Ty, who's your next outfielder?
Yeah, just really quickly to close the loop on Lane Thomas. 2017 was the trade, so I believe that was Orvalis. I think that was his year.
Okay.
So, as I've went on,
we got a guy
was phenomenal. 30 home runs last year from a kid. That's pro bat material. So moving on. Next guy in the outfield, Tyler O'Neill. We talked about him last week. Tyler O'Neill obviously had a great year. I've been on him for a while. I obviously own him. Definitely hurt me this year. 14 home runs, but disappointing overall, right? Still great player, lots to offer. Had some really, really tough stretches. So if you had him and started him in some head-to-head leagues, you got hurt. That's just how it went. Points, same thing. Lots of strikeouts in that stretch. It was bad. And there's room for improvement. I said this last week. Going to be picking him up more. Going to be adding him. Going to be looking for more shares. Injury risk, no arguments there. So if your team is full of injury guys already, you're probably not going to want to look at Tyler O'Neill. Just a heads up. But if you've got some security or guys that are reasonably healthy, Tyler O'Neill heading into next year, I like still for the obvious reasons that I liked him forever. But just got burnt real hard this year.
All right. So I'm already excited to talk about my pitching. So I'm going to blast through the rest of my outfield because I just want to talk about the pitching. But I had Jose Siri. We talked about him last week. Houston to Tampa Bay. If you want information on him and his season. And I think I may have started to light the fire on Ty being somewhat interested in Siri for 2023. But I'll slow burn that. The next guy was Cooper Hummel, who honestly just came on the radar later in the offseason, January, February. Looked him up, highly available, had a cup of coffee and had a really good finish to his 2021 minor league season, and then came up this year and 178 at bats. I thought he was going to be a starter with the Diamondbacks. He ended up becoming a starter, but didn't get legitimate play. Nothing was good. Sub 600 OPS. The average was sub 200. Struck out 30-something% of the time. Nothing good, but there's potential for him to be better. And that's my other guy. So anyway, quick and dirty on those two.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, the last guy's Castellanos, a guy that I acquired in a couple leagues to kind of get me into that playoff run. And unfortunately, he got hot about a week and a half too late. I bought him with the expectation of what I've talked about in great detail, is looking for patterns. And I've seen a pattern with Castellanos where he has really strong finishes to his season in different scenarios. I liked the home stretch for Philly. They were red hot down the stretch. And I hit the nail on the head in terms of the acquisition, but the time in which I needed him to be good, it didn't fit that timeline. So if I would have made it to the championship in the leagues that I had him, would have paid huge dividends, which was part of the acquisition strategy. So just burnt on circumstance. And I knew the risk I was taking, and it worked. It just didn't play out in terms of getting myself and the rest of my team into that position. So I think a lot of people probably had a poor experience with Castellanos this year, which I think is why I'm flagging him. The player still had an overall reasonable season. It wasn't his best by any means, but certainly not a guy that you're he was the worst player in the league. 263, the 674 OPS is substantially lower than the career 801. Just 13 home runs versus 34 last year, right? So that's the big fall off. That's the big gap. Room for improvement next year. Acquisition target, no questions there.
He is a perfect mirror image of Eugenio Suarez, also former Red, who you can say, well, he's not going to be his peak, but he is not as bad as he just was. If he's somewhere in between, we got a perfectly good fantasy player. And I think that's a good mindset to have for him.
Yeah, but he's not going to strike out 190 times.
Okay, so sure, but not all leagues are strikeout leagues, right?
Right. But so it's a phenomenal contact bat, right? We've got seasons 2019, he struck out 143 times, which for a guy that hit 27 home runs is a pretty reasonable number, right? So, not elite by any means, but he also hit 289 with that. So, for me, Suarez peak maybe, but Suarez peak was 50 home runs. So I don't know. I don't love that comparable. That's all. I agree with the philosophy of he's past his prime, which I think is the point you're trying to make. I just don't know that I love.
He's not as bad as he just was.
Yeah.
You can look for a bump up, but don't go and think that you're going to get what you once had in a Castellanos stat line. Yeah. All right. So let's move on to pitching. So my biggest burn tie 100% was Trevor Bauer, because I didn't get an inning pitched, and I did draft a very specific strategy, which would probably be a good post AFL episode topic. Would be, how would we fix what we did last year if by chance we made mistakes, which I would admit, saying everyone's wrong on Trevor Bauer and he's going to end up getting to play. Well, he didn't. And where I expected him to be a stretch run ace, he ended up just taking up a roster spot, or I drafted him wherever it was that I drafted him, bought him in auction, and all that money's just gone. So that one cost me. Another one was Bubik. Ouch, that hurt. Talked about him in a previous episode. And if we want to start to turn the corner, I'm going to ask you, Ty, what you think his overall ranking was, because it doesn't match the stat line. But try to just think right now in your head about my friend Patrick Sandoval of the Los Angeles Angels. All right. He had 11 quality starts a 291 ERA, 151 Ks in 148 and 2/3 innings on a very crappy Angels team, 6-9 record. Where do you think overall in the season rankings Patrick Sandoval was? So this is Yahoo in our 8x8 home league. Now, for reference, a completely useless player is 1,000 or higher. Somebody who is shockingly good at 2 or 3 categories can easily be inside the top 100. Where do you think Sandoval is?
419.
750.
Yeah, no, he's definitely not that.
It doesn't make sense. It's wins getting overweighted, I believe, and then obviously he doesn't have any save or holds, which is an entire category. So Sandoval, I think, is a sleeper in several formats for next year, and he also didn't get 150 innings, which people are going to circle and say that could be an issue. But for me, he failed in the sense that like I didn't roster him in any leagues I did really well in. The ones that I had him, I missed playoffs or was one and done. But Sandoval, 100%, I'm right back in on him, and hurt me again, Mister.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, the reality is there's lots to love and lots to hate with Sandoval. I mean, the OPS against righties is 725. The OPS against lefties is 385, which is phenomenal, right? Yeah. So we now have a platoon pitcher.
Which is like that might be in the next year's rule changes that you can swap your pitchers based on the batter. Yeah.
Yeah. So for whatever reason, I'm struggling to find the actual ERA that was matching these splits. I don't know why it's not showing me that. But at the end of the day, like he had a 291 ERA. Like that might be the most hidden stat line in the entire Angels like season, right? And I think kudos to you because you've been annoyingly on Sandoval for like what feels like the better part of a decade.
2019, I had him as a top 50 heading into the.
Hey, fun fact: it's his birthday today.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. So that's a fun. But I'm with you. I'm in on Sandoval. I need to see that improvement against the righties. Obviously, that's the big hurdle. And really, if you look deeper at his stats, like one of the big things that hurts him is the walks. And the walks clearly are happening against the righties because he's pitching around them.
He's nibbling,
and I've seen it like visibly, like the Jays, like he didn't last more than 5 innings against the Jays and their right-handed heavy lineup, right? Like that's the games that I've really seen him, but the stuff's there. I think he'll figure it out. I like him moving forward. But again, I tell you this all the time, like you sometimes beat yourself up on these guys, but like this is a guy that you're right on. You just have to wait long enough. Whereas I have zero problem waiting, and I have zero problem being annoying about me waiting. And so that's where you're at with Sandoval. He'll be fine. For me, my first guy on the list, Baz, we talked about it last week. Obviously, he's just had a complete derailment of what was supposed to be early success in his career, given the injuries. We might not see Shane Baz next year, right? Like at all. That's a very realistic possibility. Yeah. And I think we will. I think we're going to see a September run because I think Tampa's going to be competitive again, obviously. And I think very similar to what we saw with Glasnow down the stretch here. That's my expectation because Tampa, frankly, as much as they're a reasonable pitching team, they do not have starting pitching depth right now, right? That they can lean on. It'll be interesting to see what they do with that rotation in the offseason. You've got guys like Yarbrough and Chirinos and guys that can step up into that role and fill some innings, but not Shane Baz level arms. And definitely they need to find a way to get Glasnow locked in for a while. But anyway, Baz hurt me. Obviously, I drafted him in a lot of leagues or traded for him in others, and I got beat up pretty good on that one. I still think one of the more promising young arms, but until he's back from injury, we just don't know what he's going to be after that. But upsides there, no arguments. And if you're completely rebuilding, like this is a great guy to go get. Like, some other team is probably pissed they're going to lose him for a year. If you give them a good offer, you could have some real upside here with this arm.
Yeah, it's likely we don't see him again until he's 25. He finished the year as a 23-year-old, and as we're saying, we may not see him next year. And if we do, as Ty alluded to, could be as an RP, not an SP. The other thing to think about here too is that Baz has Tampa Bay in his way rather than the Houston, like, you're healthy now, here you go, you can do it. He has no track record of success, right? His max innings in any season is 81 and a third, and that was in 2019. I guess if we're going to tack on the fall league, 92 innings he did have that year, so total of that. But innings is something that Baz needs, and MLB experience is the other thing that he needs. So I would be a little bit concerned, but like you said, Ty, I mean, you could go and put him on your roster now. As soon as your season starts in 2023, boom, to your IL. And then you're just waiting to see exactly what he does. But if it's contracts league, he's still rookie eligible, 40 and a third innings pitched career. So something to note for those leagues that it matters.
Stuff matters. He has it. That's the last part I'll add on top of that. But
Right.
Next guy on my list is a guy that I did what I'm suggesting you should do with Shane Baz in a lot of leagues, and that's Dustin May. I went and got him, held on to him, and I did it in our home league, Robbie. He's going to be one of my keepers. Yeah, he's going to be one of my keepers. Like, I drafted him early on a team that I knew I had some depth already for the purposes of keeping him. And
I feel like I offered you Kershaw and a pick, and you needed to give me like picks or something with May, and you were like, no.
Yeah, why would I trade a guy that might have the best stuff in baseball? Like,
for the guy that does have the best stuff in baseball? Kershaw?
Yeah, formerly known as the guy that has the best stuff in baseball. So that is now
Rich Hill. Are we talking about Rich Hill? I know that's your comparable.
Rich Hill
right?
has one pitch, and in most of his success is that the pitch comes in from like a 45-degree angle, and the sun's in the hitter's eye. So,
it's park.
Yeah,
it's park to park.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah, he's the old guy from Major League. Like, I got the stuff underneath my hat.
That's right. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. What the hell is that guy's name?
Joe Boo needs a refill. Yeah.
You need to take Jesus Christ, the Lord and Savior, as your.
Anyway, point is that Dustin May is freaking awesome. However, he did very similar to what I was hoping for from Tatis down the stretch this year to really have an injection. He didn't help. Like, he pitched a little bit and had moments of just pure brilliance in those outings because the stuff is electric. He, unlike Justin Verlander, who we talked about last week, just didn't come back with fine form. And he will get there. He will be that good. And right now is about as good a time as any to try to steal Dustin May from someone, because the stuff's there. There is enough track record to see that. And if you watch 5 minutes, you can see how good the stuff is. His pants will probably be a little tighter next year, which would be great. He'll be more dialed in, and we'll be laughing. But yeah, I mean, Dustin May hurt me, and that's why I went there.
And I will add to your point on Dustin May that the Dodgers, for the first time in years, do not have too many starting pitchers on the books for 2023. They have openings in the rotation, and a guy like Dustin May just immediately gets penciled in, and Julio Reyes just is penciled in. I mean, whatever, he's an ERA champ now, but that was the thing 2 years ago, was what's Urias going to do, right? Well, now we know what a guy like May will do next year. He's just going to start every fifth day. He's going out.
ERA champ.
Yeah, he was.
Good for him. I did not see that coming.
Yeah, in the one league that I traded him in, it was a very significant trade. I did get Rodriguez with Baltimore back as part of the centerpiece of that deal, and I was willing to make it simply because I thought I need more than one really good pitcher in order to win, because we have 3-day scoring periods and 4-day scoring periods, much like an MLB series. Anyway, complex league. Another day. Live and die by the sword. Tristan McKenzie allowed me to live a little longer in a few leagues this year. Thank goodness, Ty. I know you didn't like him headed into this year, but now he's got 191 and a third inning season under his belt, plus playoff time. 11-11 record was not ideal, but 11 wins I'll take. 190 Ks. I was hoping for 230. I was hoping for a better K per 9. But an ERA at 2.96 is beautiful. This is his first significant significant drop. Also, really his first full MLB season, 18 quality starts. Thank you very much, Tristan McKenzie. For every Chris Bubik that I was in on this year, I seem to have Tristan McKenzie on the same roster, and it was just like, stop with the Bubik, put him on the bench, cut him, whatever. McKenzie became the guy, and didn't have the peaks and valleys that he was known for. He was known for poor Septembers. He was perfectly fine. And
so
I'm loving him.
Here's my concern with McKenzie. The hard hit rate is well above league average. And so is the exit velocity. So that's my big issue here. The barrel percentage is up, right? Like the league average for barrel percentage is 6.7. He's at 9.8. Those are substantially like potentially damning numbers, right? The chase rate's reasonable at 74th. He's in the 74th percentile. Like the upside, there's some stuff there, like no arguments, but the peripheral data to me is mortifying for McKenzie. I've been going on and on about it. Can he break through? Maybe. Like Cleveland just has a way. I will acknowledge that he could just defy all odds, because I think it's safe to say Cleveland knows something on the pitching side that no one else knows. They can run Eli Morgan out there with no problems, and he's somehow successful.
Yeah, playoff win now. Eli Morgan has a playoff win. Not as a starter, but
he just threw softballs like above, like at the top of the zone. Like,
and he got
it
out.
looked like my men's league. Like it did. Like
your men's league. Well, I only have two pitchers left to talk about. Brady Singer is one of the live by, die by the sword guys for me, but I talked about him in a previous episode, talked about the success and my happiness for Brady Singer. Even though the season started for him very poorly with KC, he righted the wrong of the front office, not his own play. And that's why spring training stats don't matter. Hashtag no spring training stats 2023. Let's do that.
What do you mean?
Anyway, that is so loud. For anyone who doesn't know what the hell just happened, if you check us out on YouTube, which is Dinger's podcast, at 1 hour 7 minutes in, you'll see that Ty just has a thing that says spring training stats, but it makes that noise. It's so
it's just
loud.
so, the best part is that it's more painful than the spring training stats themselves.
It's true. So I only have two pitchers left to talk about, and you've got two left. So I've said my piece on my McKenzie Singer boys. Let's talk a little Sixto.
Yeah, I mean, Sixto for me is a guy that I still feel very strongly about. I think he's a guy that Miami might move this offseason. Like I think I'm with you on that one. Yeah, like I if they're looking at what they have in their stable, like Sixto probably has the most pull. Like Pablo's a guy that, based on what they put him out there this trade deadline, as a guy that they'd be willing to look at.
Right.
And everyone's like, listen, like he's good, but not what you're asking for. Well, Sixto might be good enough to get what they were asking for. And frankly, the injury risk is probably worth the reward for Miami. So I think that might be the outcome here. I thought he'd be back for a good chunk of this season, right? That's where I got hurt. I just expected him back. He's entering that category now of like Team Glass, and it's definitely scary because I own him in a couple spots, but I still like the upside, very similar to what we talked about Baz before. Like there's enough here that this still could be an ace. He could be the 1B to Sandy Alcantara there in Miami. Like, I mean, there was a time where I would have said he'd be the 1, and Alcantara be the 2 or the 1B, but I think that certainly is different now. But yeah, I mean, I got burnt. I'm not giving up. A lot of my lists, I'm not giving up. I'm just think I'm early or had circumstantial. He fits that build for sure.
Well, he definitely had a weird 2021 to 2022 because we were expecting post injury to see him immediately up and with the MLB club and pitching, but that just wasn't in the cards for him this year. But now it's as if he's buried and will become almost like an Anderson Espinoza type prospect.
Great comparable like that.
Who is Yeah, just like he's not pitching. So what are we supposed to do as, intelligent fantasy baseball minds when we want to build a good dynasty roster and we don't know what to do with a guy with Sixto who doesn't have a stat line, who doesn't have an up-to-date scouting report? You can go and look at like the Prospects 360, Prospects 1500, Prospects whatever. You can go and look around and try to find info on them. It's not there. It's not updated. So you have to make an educated guess on, your particular roster and your league settings as to whether you can afford to dip whatever, I would say, multiple B-level prospects in the hopes that Sixto is still an A-level prospect. But he's got MLB time, and it wasn't shiny and bright, but it wasn't enough to exceed rookie eligibility. So, that's a trickier situation. But for anybody headed into this year that had him, absolutely you had high expectations, and it's okay to say that he didn't screw you, but that you didn't get what you wanted out of him. I don't know that I would look to move him if I had him, because I don't think I could get much back versus what I expected or expect him to be able to do. But you never know what kind of a name someone might dangle, right? Like there could be that one guy that really just sells it for you. And I know last year, one of those guys for me that people thought was flash in the pan and I was thinking long-term for was Ranger Suarez, with the Phillies, who came out last year and had just an amazing SP from RP swap second half of the year. And his stat line last year in 2022 in 155 and a third innings was 3.65 ERA, 129 Ks, 10-7 record, 11 quality starts, which is a perfectly good line for a pitcher that you want to see develop and then next year be, a Tristan McKenzie type 190 plus inning guy. But the problem is that he had a 136 ERA, 107 strikeouts in 106 innings in 2021, as well as being the type of guy who had some save holds for you. So everyone had really high expectations. I'm fine with this Ranger Suarez line, but I was honestly hoping for maybe 20 more innings of this so I could have seen some more production. So he's someone I had everywhere and typically overdrafted, which is why I would say I had died by the sword. I was hoping there would be a bigger breakout, a lower ERA, but in a dynasty way, dynasty mindset, I'm okay with what I saw from him in the 2, I think, leagues. Maybe there were 3 leagues that I acquired him. I didn't have him at all outside of maybe 1 league. It headed into 2021. Now I've got him in 4 leagues that I have significant financial investments in. So,
yeah.
And I'll be back for next year.
Well, and pitching's tricky. And I mean, honestly, like there's certain things that you can see, with certain advanced understandings of baseball, but like you do a phenomenal job of picking out the stat lines well in advance. And it's great because I love having these conversations like on guys like that or Sandoval, who you mentioned earlier. Like you see certain things in the stats well before I do. And I'm like, yeah, the mechanics are there and there's something here. And he did this in this situation, right? And it ends up being like really good between our two minds. But Suarez is a guy that I don't think there's eliteness there. Again, that's the thing I flagged for him. Like I think there's serviceability, right? Like there's a guy that can be productive at some levels, but he's going to hurt you sometimes. Like that just is what it is. And I mean, he had a reasonable season, but a guy that really fits that same. Go ahead.
Sorry, if you would SP1 to SP5 him, where would you put Suarez based 3. On kind of how? Yeah, okay, right in the middle. All right, which is fine,
3. Yeah.
Right? Like,
100%. Yeah. Like it just where you went early in the offseason was like he could be an SP1 or 2. And that's where I was like, whoa, let's wait a second here. Like he can be good.
I was certainly thinking he could be an SP2 from 2022 forward. That was my mindset. Absolutely.
He's basically Clay Holmes on the starter side and a lefty, right? Like he's going to give you production. He's going to be relatively consistent, but he's just a guy that throws a really good pitch with a couple other okay pitches, right? I mean, that's really what he is. And ultimately that's why he can't reach SP1 ever. Montez is the guy that I have next on my list. Very similar, right? Like fastballs, some nights really good. Splitter's usually pretty good. But if the fastball isn't on point with the splitter, he's just not good. And the slider's not good if the other two pitches aren't good. And we saw that in the back half of what the Yankee Montas was. He was terrible, just terrible. Couldn't locate, couldn't do anything. He didn't get all those foul ball outs in Oakland. And all of a sudden he was getting beat up. Very disappointing for me, Montas. Still like the upside. I have him super cheap in a couple spots. He's still going to give you strikeouts. There's enough here to roster him in a lot of formats, but for me, I really need to see a step forward from him. Spring's training stats are really going to matter for Frankie Montas.
On a personal note, I have had a lot of Frankie Montas because I was really thinking ahead of the curve in that he had a spot in Oakland in 2019, I think it was, in the rotation, and he ended up getting SP5 and he kind of had his breakout year there. And I had him in a lot of places and it was great because found money, you pick up the SP5, he turns out to give you SP23 value. You're very excited. That's great. Since that season, he has done nothing but disappoint me on my most competitive teams. And this year was no exception. I actually traded him away in a league that I had a perfect 20-0 regular season. I traded back for him at the trade deadline just to further strengthen my playoff push. And it was crappy starts from him and others. Absolutely, collapse on my team that my perfect season in one 30-team league went up in smoke. And as a result, I have just decided that Frankie Montas no longer exists from fantasy purposes. And it's okay to do that. He is dead to me. Frankie Montas is now dead to me. And it has 100% to do with the fact that I have personally felt burned by him. If I ever met him, I would let him know what he's done to me. And I would hope later on that night when he's brushing his teeth in the mirror that he thought, that guy was a real a-hole. Or maybe I should be better, because that's what I truly want, is for him to be better. But he won't be on my team moving forward.
Well, here's the thing. He's got to be better, or the Yankee fans are going to let him know, and he's going to have a bad time. He is new Aaron Hicks, right? That's the reality.
I was thinking Sonny Gray.
No. He might be more hated than Aaron Hicks, right?
Well, Hicks is hated because Cashman gave him a 7-year contract. That's Aaron Hicks' problem.
Brutal. And he's done very little to.
Well, because he was hurt so much.
His whole career, he had a 6-month window where he was good. That's
it. It was him and Didi. They were both really good in 18 or something like that. And anyway,
yeah, but Didi was good because his fly balls were home runs. That's it.
Yeah. Well, okay. So my last pitcher here, speaking of home runs, he gave up a few of them this year and died by the sword of Jose Suarez with the Angels. He was basically SP7 in a 6-man rotation. So that's rough. But overall, the line isn't terrible. But here's the thing, 109 innings pitched. When you need a 150 plus and you get 109, that's a disappointment. He had 103 strikeouts, an 8-8 record, which is 2 more wins than Sandoval, who I believe had 6, if I'm remembering correctly. I have been consuming some Coors. 4 quality starts for Suarez. Another issue, he's a 5-inning pitcher. And that is something that if he's going to be given, what are we going to call it? An SP4 spot next year, SP5, even SP6 spot, he's going to need to be able to turn those into quality starts, because he can be a good pitcher, but he can also really frustrate you and walk a bunch of guys. And Jose Suarez will be on the outside looking in for my dynasty rosters next year. That's where I am on him. Who's your final, that was your final starter, was Montas. So you can dive into the bullpen.
Yeah, bullpen. For me, Gratterall missed a good chunk of this year. It hurt me a bunch in some of the deeper leagues. Clearly a power arm down the stretch. Going to be a power arm moving forward, but very similar to Ranger Suarez and Clay Holmes. Really relies on the sinker and the power sinker. And ultimately, it's good enough, right? It does the job. Is he ever going to be the closer? No, probably shouldn't be. Great setup guy. Save hold league. Love him. For me, it was just he missed too much time, and that's it. It's that simple. There's not a lot else to go into there.
Sure. Mine's an absolute, grand salami, except for the fact that he sucked around the trade deadline. So in the leagues where I was selling, the offers went from high pick returns to, mid, whatever. I didn't deal him anywhere because it changed. It was Clay Holmes. Clay Holmes was somebody that I thought had the ability to be very useful in save hold leagues, and that was heavy on the holds, light on the saves. Well, it turned out he was just a closer, or is a closer, to the point that Aroldis Chapman is just hanging out at home now. No longer, well, he's actually technically a Yankee, but we know that's not going to last for long into the offseason. 27 save holds for Clay Holmes in 63 and 2/3 innings, 65 Ks, and 7 wins this year, and a 2.54 ERA. Now, he did have a couple weeks of blow up and then an IL stint, but he came back and he was good. So I'm really liking my Clay Holmes dynasty shares where I've got them. And he was a positive for me. However, like I said, he had that stretch in the middle of the season that in the leagues that I wasn't competing completely ruined his own trade value. So I'm interested to see what happens with him headed into next year.
I mean, real risk there, Robbie, taking the Yankee closer as a guy that's a miss.
Well, it's live by the sword, which I did, and die by the sword. And he hurt me around the trade deadline. And I've got him everywhere, absolutely everywhere.
And do you know how many people feel bad for you? 0. No one feels bad that you're the Clay Holmes owner. Like no one feels for you here.
If I posted the rosters where I have him, there are also 0 championships with those rosters.
That's why you blur out the rest.
Yeah, though I was just say there may be the one, because even in the one, Rotorani was like, I don't know what year that's from. Like the one league that I won this year, he's questioning whether that was even my league or not. It was Ben Palmer, who we've been on with podcasting through Palazzo podcast in the preseason. I ended up joining a dynasty league of his and I won that. And I picked up Holmes and others. But anyway, Holmes is a guy that I did well from. Ty, what about a guy that you were hoping really good things from?
Well, I mean, Jorge Alcala is a guy that I really still like moving forward in Minnesota. I mean, obviously, Yohan Duran kind of ran with that back end role, and they brought in a bunch of mediocre guys to pitch in front of him in Minnesota. That went well down the stretch, but Alcala is a guy there. And frankly, if that back end of that bullpen is Duran and Alcala moving forward, like, woo, that's gross. Like that's an impressive 1-2 punch. Velocity stuff, it's all there. So Alcala missed the entire year this year with injury. I had him in a couple spots to be the guy that solidified my bullpen in a couple leagues as the guy that would get me some of those saves. And that was before Duran had come onto the scene. Like he was the guy. He was supposed to be the closer and just whiffed. So that's now gone. He's now a holds guy. Strikeouts will be there still. So I still like him. But if I'm not in a saves league, he's useless. If I am in a saves league, he's useless. But definitely got hurt real bad on that one. No questions.
And I mean, the possibility exists that he could be back in that position next year. But first he's got to come back and he's got to come back and pitch effectively. And then you need something to happen with Duran.
Yeah, Duran's the guy. And Duran's the pit bull too. Like if you watch 5 minutes of him on TV, you're like, ooh, I don't want to run into that guy in a dark alley because he will like bite my face off. And like just don't. So like that's what you want in your closer, frankly.
Yeah. Like Romero with Toronto, he's got that intensity, and it helps if you don't totally believe in the stuff that you see, that like he also has that want it, not that I'm better than you hater thing. He's actually looks like he will just kill you with a stare. So
and it's gonna be tough to overcome 89 strikeouts in 67 innings from Duran. Like, sorry,
right?
Like that's just real good.
Absolutely, yeah. So another guy that I bought into everywhere this year, and the only league I think that I didn't have him in was like our big money auction league, 30-team league, because I made the mistake of posting him right away when people were like throwing money around. So then he just went up over $3, which is $3 actual dollars. And I wasn't willing to put that much money into a guy who signed a 2-year contract with Tampa. That's Brooks Raley. But Ty, I didn't even know this until a minute ago. He finished the year with 28 save holds. I did not know he had that many, and only 2 the last, half of September. And the reason that I put him on my miss list, like the die by the sword, was because he had the first save of the year for Tampa Bay, and then nothing for 3 weeks, like no saves. I think maybe a hold or something like that. And I'm like, what the hell did Tampa Bay do? I was so looking forward to seeing Rayleigh going out, like in crucial spots when they needed a win. But by the end of the season, a 2.68 ERA, 61 Ks in 52 and 2/3 innings, but only 1 win and 2 losses, which, whatever with the losses, but only 1 win. But honestly, I kind of thought he was bad, but now when I'm just like looking at the year-end summary, he was fine if you're in a save hold leagues. But if you were looking for him, as I was, to take over as a closer in Tampa Bay, just because they are weird like that, and they gave him a 2-year deal, and I think he's the highest paid player. He made $4 million on Tampa Bay. I think he was the highest paid guy. That's a joke for everybody out there. Rayleigh exceeded. Oh, thank you. Rayleigh exceeded expectations. But I thought he would actually become the closer. So that was
he can't be the closer because like lefties can't.
They won't do it. Yeah,
they
won't do it.
Can't happen. Last guy on my list was just awful this year, and like I just can't wrap my head around it. Julian Merryweather in Toronto is a guy that I've loved. I still think there's something there.
And a lot of people do, Ty. A lot of people do.
But for me, like he's telegraphing something because he just gives up like no doubt bombs that aren't like the moonshot, like I swang hard and missed the barrel. They're like line drive, squared up piss rockets. And like I just can't get past it because the stuff's too good for him to get hit as hard as he does. Like it just screams he's tipping something, right? Like I can't get past it because like he throws 98 and locates almost never, but at the same time, like not like they don't miss it. Like they're sitting on it, and he has a good changeup and a good slider. Like so, like he's got 3+ pitches. So there's no reason a guy with 3+ pitches should be as poor at getting a baseball to not be hit squarely as Julian Merryweather. Like it's a different conversation. And somewhere right now, Ronnie is listening to this call and going, "Yeah, I hate that guy." Just for sure,
him and Stroman.
But yeah, at the end of the day, like there's still upside here, and I don't know what's missing or how they fix it. Like I don't have the time that I'm going to waste on this guy. But there's closer upside. Will he ever reach that? I doubt it. But could he get? Yes. And so that's the trap I'm now in. Is do I die on this hill? And that was last week's episode. But like, I want to die on this hill because
you're talking yourself into more Merryweather. Be careful.
But like fastball velocities, like top level, like all of the peripheral stats say he should be better. However, the exit velos and the hard hit percentages not good. Like again, we talked about this earlier. League average 35. His hard hit percentage 45%. How about no? So yeah, just bad. But obviously you can feel my pain. We need to fix it. So the fastball slider, I think, is the way forward for him. He's got to tighten that percentage because he throws the slider 35% almost, or no, 34. And the changeup's just there to offset the fastball every now and then. That's it. It's I would like to see it frankly move from like a 9% pitch to like a 14. Like I think that would help his mix. Like people would be sitting on the fastball a touch less, and then the slider's good enough to get away with it. So I think that's what they need to do with him. Whether they do it or not, we'll see.
And that might be a case of intelligent manager, pitching coach, catcher looking and having the conversation you just had with yourself and saying, here's a way to just like get a strike early. And then that changes everything.
Or $50,000 consulting fee I will fix it.
Oh, I hope they. Well, I mean, we know DePoto's listening out in Seattle to this podcast, but we don't know if Atkins and Shapiro are listening.
To be fair,
Toronto.
DePoto and I agree on the bullpen side of things, right? He's like, yeah, this Munoz was good. I heard it from, Dinger's podcast. I'm going to go
Just
trade
like
for
for
him. But
years, he was a relief pitcher and he couldn't put together a good bullpen. I mean, he started to do it in 2021, but it really came to fruition this year.
I've been saying Munoz since 2017.
That
Like,
was
this
a
is a
long
guy that
time.
I've been preaching forever. And now everybody's like, wow, this guy's good. Like, yeah, no shit. Like, this stuff's phenomenal.
Well, he's one of the few prospects that for the longest time as a prospect was known to be a relief pitcher, not if he can't, the sentence is, well, if his worst case scenario is closer, right? That's the, castaway that they give to a starter. Well, his worst case scenario will be that he's a closer. No, Munoz was like, this is a closer. So
he might be the best closer in baseball, and he's not even a closer yet.
Right.
And that's like, just think about that statement. Like, that's how good this arm is.
Yeah. 2023 will be a big year for that Seattle bullpen, and to see what exactly shakes out in spring training if they try to align anything up. But anyway, the last guy for me, Ty, is somebody who did fail 100% as a closer. That's Tyler Wells with Baltimore Orioles, simply because he went from being kind of looking like he was going to be the closer at the end of 2021 when he got hurt, but he had 5 save holds in September alone, to starting out in the bullpen with Baltimore and then transitioning as a starter. Very exciting. And he had a decent run this year, ended up with 103 innings, had a long IL stint, came back in September. I think he pitched once, and that was it. May have been 2 starts, but either way, it wasn't good to finish for him. But in 103 2/3 innings, the former relief pitcher, Rule 5 pick, by the way, converted to a starter, had a 7-7 record with 5 quality starts and a 4.25 ERA. I'm looking forward to Tyler Wells in Dynasty. Stock will be low. He's 10% rostered on Yahoo. I can just tell you that because I'm looking right now, but that's a heavy redraft site, not Dynasty. One
thing I like here, Robbie, is you've got the reverse splits on Wells, right? Like, his versus lefty numbers are excellent. And so it's easier for a righty to improve against righties than against the lefties, right? So he got hit fairly hard this year. Overall, the exit numbers not great. The barrel numbers are okay, right? So that's the balance between the lefty righty splits we just talked about. I like him as a guy that can take that step forward. Like, we watched Jorge Lopez go through a very similar transition in Baltimore. Right. And
the reverse, though, Lopez went from a starter who struggled to a relief pitcher who was doing well. And I think they felt the same of Wells, that he can go from a relief pitcher who was doing well to a starter that can do well. But the one thing he was lacking was the K per 9 as a starter, which I think is what I personally am expecting to see increase next year with him.
Well, and I'm going to suggest something that you're not going to like. I think he goes back into the pen next year. Because Baltimore's going to
get out of town.
Starters. Yeah, I mean, they're going to sign some starters, but the splits, like, they preach to that. Like, they say he's going to move that direction because he's got great lefty numbers, right? So he's going to be the guy that comes in to face 6, 7, 8, 9 with 3 of those 4 guys being lefties or switch hitters. Right? So
I don't like any of this. I don't like any of this for him not being a starter next year. I did want to, because, like, I mean, you're making sense, which is why I don't like it. If you were talking nonsense, I'd let you go. But I got to cut you off when it makes sense. Felix Bautista is a guy that we were told about by Ben Palmer, who I mentioned earlier, as he is an Orioles fan. So he was immediately on my radar at the start of the season. I scooped him up in a few places where I could, but he ended up with 29 save holds, 88 Ks, and 65 2/3 innings. You know who I'm talking about, 2.19 ERA, and did not have a great second half of September, 3 2/3 innings, 3 save holds, but a 12.27 ERA. That's an RP ERA when you have a blow up. That's just what happens in the month. It can mess with you. But Felix Bautista, I think, is going to come in next year with mid-level, like I would say in the teens for closer predictions, or rankings. I can see him being like a top 7-8 guy. because there are not legit closers out there. And I think if Wells goes back, as you're saying, if he was to go back into the bullpen, Batista is the guy, circle him in. He's your boy. And he's not a 22-year-old or anything. I think next year will be 28 or 29. Batista is going to have the closer role from day one. And that can really make a big impact, because we also, Ty, or you, I should say, Garrett Whitlock, you talked a lot of, he's not on your list. You talked a lot about him this offseason as, a closer, starter, converted guy. Well, unfortunately, the Red Sox did that, but like a couple times this year where they moved him back and forth. So he wasn't able to be the elite guy. But as far as like a positive asset with no cost in Dynasty, you were bang on with him. And that's somebody that's not on your list. But certainly somebody that I think is warranted. Again, and he also had injury at some point this year, which did ruin a few of the guys that would have been obvious picks. They just missed too much time to be on the positive side of a live by the sword, die by the sword.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, there's always like things to look for here. That's why we do this episode, right? Like, look at like the pieces here. There's lots of guys in this list on both sides here that have huge upside. Right. And they just had bad 22s, or they got hurt, or they didn't meet the expectations that were set on them by us or by preseason rankings. Right. So these are all things that you have to watch for, and you can benefit from the recoil heading into next year's draft season or off season. So that's why we do it. That's why we do it right at the end of the season, like we're doing right now. And this is why you love us here at Dingers, because we aren't like the rest of them. And ultimately, it's why you can get ahead of the curve here and win championships, because Dingers, only fantasy baseball podcast for smart people. Robbie, it's been lovely. I think it's a great spot to jump off. We'll see you next time here on Dingers.